In 1873, a young professor sat down and wrote a sentence that would take most people an entire lifetime to understand. He wrote that the individual has always had to struggle to avoid being overwhelmed by the tribe. And if he stood alone, he was in danger of being wiped out. Nietzsche wasn't describing ancient history. He was describing a war that happens quietly, invisibly, inside every single person who has ever tried to become someone stable, someone solid, someone who cannot be knocked over by circumstance, criticism, or crisis. He had a word for what survives that war. He called it character, not personality, not charisma, something far rarer and far harder to build. This is a video about how that kind of character is actually constructed, not inherited, not given, but built piece by piece, often through the exact experiences most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid. Let's start with what character is not. It is not confidence. Confidence can be borrowed, faked, or manufactured by circumstance. A good week, a compliment, a lucky win. It evaporates the moment circumstances turn. Nietzsche had little interest in a self-belief that only exists when life is going well, because that isn't strength. It's a reflection of good luck dressed up as identity. It is not consistency of mood. Some of the most unshakable people in history were miserable, tormented, difficult. Nietzsche himself lived in near constant physical pain. Unshakable character was never about feeling good. It was about remaining structurally intact while feeling terrible. And it is not the absence of doubt. Nietzsche distrusted people who claimed total certainty about themselves and the world. He believed real character isn't the absence of internal conflict. It's the capacity to hold that conflict without collapsing, without needing an audience to resolve it for you. So what is character in Nietzsche's terms? It's the presence of an internal structure strong enough to survive contact with reality. And like any structure, it isn't given. It's built under load, under pressure, through repeated stress that either breaks something or reinforces it. This brings us to the first and most uncomfortable principle in Nietzsche's philosophy of character. It cannot be built in comfort. He wrote that the discipline of suffering, of great suffering. Do you not know that it is this discipline alone which has created every elevation of humanity so far? This is one of his most misunderstood ideas because it sounds like he's glorifying pain for its own sake. He isn't. He's making a much colder, more precise claim. That character is a structural response to resistance, the same way a muscle is a structural response to load. Remove the load entirely, and the structure never forms. It stays soft, untested, and it collapses the very first time reality applies real pressure. This is why people who have had everything handed to them, comfort, protection, constant reassurance, often turn out to have the least stable character of all. Not because they're bad people, but because nothing in their life ever forced the internal architecture to form. The first real hardship they encounter isn't a test they pass or fail. It's the very first moment the structure is even built. So the foundation of unshakable character, in Nietzsche's view, begins with a decision most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Stop treating hardship as something that happened to you, and start treating it as raw material you are responsible for using. The second principle is what Nietzsche called self-overcoming, and it's the engine that turns raw hardship into actual character, rather than just scar tissue. Suffering alone doesn't build anyone. Plenty of people go through enormous pain and come out the other side smaller, more bitter, more fragile than before. The difference between those people and the ones who emerge stronger isn't the amount of suffering. It's what they do with it afterward. Nietzsche believed real character requires actively working on yourself, the way a sculptor works on stone, deliberately, consciously, repeatedly chipping away at whatever in you is weak, reactive, or dependent on other people's approval. This isn't passive healing. It's closer to training. You don't build unshakable character by waiting for time to pass after a hard experience. You build it by extracting a lesson from that experience and then deliberately rehearsing the version of yourself that lesson demands until it becomes structural rather than theoretical. This is why Nietzsche was obsessed with discipline in the smallest, most unglamorous details of daily life. His own routines were famously rigid, built around specific hours for walking, writing, and reading, regardless of how he felt on any given day. He believed the person who cannot govern small things, a morning routine, a minor discomfort, a minor temptation, will never be able to govern the large ones, the moments when real character is actually tested. The third principle is one Nietzsche returned to constantly: the refusal to outsource your sense of self to other people's opinions. Most people's stability is rented, not owned. It depends entirely on external conditions remaining favorable, on being liked, being validated, being agreed with. The moment those conditions change, the entire structure wobbles because it was never actually load-bearing. It was decoration, mistaken for foundation. Nietzsche called the alternative self-legislation, becoming your own source of judgment about your own worth, your own standards, your own direction. This doesn't mean ignoring other people entirely. It means no longer needing their agreement as the precondition for your own stability. A person with unshakable character can be criticized, misunderstood, even hated, and remain fundamentally intact because their sense of self was never built on the shifting ground of public opinion in the first place. This is genuinely rare because it requires tolerating something most people organize their entire lives to avoid: disapproval, without immediately trying to fix it, explain it away, or win it back. Nietzsche believed the moment you can sit inside someone's disapproval without flinching, without needing to immediately repair it, you have found the exact edge where character actually begins. The fourth principle is a more fatty: the love of one's fate. Not resignation, not simply enduring what happens to you. An active, almost fierce embrace of everything that has happened, including the worst of it, as necessary material for whoever you are in the process of becoming. This matters for character in a very specific way. People with fragile character spend enormous energy resenting their own past, wishing it had gone differently, treating their wounds as proof that life has been unfair to them specifically. That resentment keeps the wound open indefinitely because it positions the person as a permanent victim of their own history rather than the author of what comes next. Nietzsche's answer was brutal but liberating. Stop asking why this happened to you. Start asking what it makes possible now. Not because the hardship was good, because refusing to extract anything useful from it guarantees it was wasted twice. Once when it happened, and again every day you spend resenting it instead of using it. The fifth principle, and perhaps the hardest, is learning to act correctly even in the total absence of an audience. Nietzsche admired what he called the sovereign individual, someone whose word to himself is a promise he actually keeps, whether or not anyone else will ever know if he kept it. This is the real test of character, because almost anyone can behave well when they're being watched, when there's a reputation on the line, when good behavior earns visible reward. Character reveals itself precisely in the moments no one is watching. The discipline maintained alone, the honesty chosen when a lie would be easier and undetectable, the standard upheld when abandoning it would cost nothing. This is why character cannot be performed into existence. It can only be built through thousands of small, private decisions that no one applauds, repeated long enough that they stop being decisions at all and simply become who you are. Put these 5 principles together, and you get something close to Nietzsche's actual blueprint. Character isn't a personality trait you either have or don't. It's a structure built the same way any structure is built, through repeated exposure to load, deliberately used rather than merely survived, anchored to your own internal standard rather than rented from other people's approval, reconciled with your own past rather than at war with it, and tested again and again in the silence where no one is watching and nothing is owed to you for showing up anyway. None of this happens quickly. Nietzsche never offered a shortcut because he didn't believe one exists. A structure built quickly, without real load, is a structure that has never actually been tested, and untested structures are precisely the ones that collapse at the worst possible moment. So the real question isn't whether your life has given you enough hardship to build character from. It almost certainly has, or will. The real question is whether you've been treating that hardship as evidence of how unfair your life has been, or as the exact raw material Nietzsche believed was necessary all along to build the one thing that cannot be given to you, cannot be bought, and cannot be taken away once it's actually yours.